Welcome to the show. We're coming to you from the beautiful Mambo Interiors Design Studio. Now, it's never an easy topic to talk about. We're talking about domestic violence. Now, it's taking and wrecking lives of people from the leafy suburbs of Nairobi to the rugged terrain of Turkana. There is no comprehensive data in terms of the magnitude of how many people are actually affected, and not to mention the stigma that a lot of victims go through. A lot of people are suffering under this issue very silently. But I thought it's time that we actually have a conversation about it, a candid conversation. Now, for you to engage us on social media, you can use the hashtag #KnowMore so we can go more into it and find out maybe your experience if you have been a survivor or if you're actually still in it. But before we start that chat, I want you to take a look at this.
Last year, December 1st, on a Thursday, when I was attacked by my boyfriend. I was beaten by him, and at last he ended up using knife on me. While we were in the process, a fellow left from the road, passing by, he met us. He said our boyfriend and girlfriend thing. I keep crying, calling him, he said, like your business. Like your own private thing, you're going and said to him. He left, not knowing the man was killing me.
This Liberian woman's story is not unique and can be replicated in many households here in Kenya. Domestic violence is often a taboo subject in African culture, one that is suffered silently and condoned culturally in some areas. The Gender Violence Recovery Center at the Nairobi Women's Hospital has between 250 and 300 domestic violence survivors come through its doors on a monthly basis. According to the 2014 Demographic and Health Survey, 38% of women respondents aged between 15 and 49 had experienced physical violence committed by their husband or partner. However, these figures don't give a full picture, as very few victims come forward to report cases. Despite this scenario that sometimes gets grimmer, there is a glimmer of hope with the recent Protection Against Domestic Violence Act now in effect. The act seeks to recognize that domestic violence in all forms is unacceptable behavior and recognizes 21 forms of violence. Victims who suffer injuries or damage to their property will also be eligible for compensation and can apply to the court for protection order, which will prevent abusers from contacting them. It is a step in the right direction that will hopefully give more victims the courage to speak out and get help, as the number hopefully dwindles to nil. Well, the fact is, what you've just seen is a reality for many, many women here in Kenya. And with me in the lounge is a distinguished panel of guests who are here to discuss this issue. We have Jennifer Karina. She's an author, relationship coach, and a motivational speaker. We have Wanjiru Moiruri, and she is actually a domestic violence survivor. She went through 10 years of abuse and has been brave enough to come and share her story and be an encouragement to many women who could still be in that situation. We also have Beverlyn Ongaro. She is a lawyer who works on democracy, governance, and gender issues. And of course, Ken Oko, who is a sociologist from the University of Nairobi. Thank you all for joining me. Wanjiru, I want to start with you. You, out of all of us, have been through this firsthand, and what we watched, of course, hit home, which is very understandable. But if you could just take us through your experience of what you went through.
Well, it doesn't always start with violence. And at the beginning, everything was quite okay. But it started with emotional, I would call it emotional torture. And my self-esteem went down. And I felt like I wasn't good enough. And everything I did was wrong. And it escalated. I guess that wasn't enough for him. So it went to the battering. And for me, it was very difficult to talk about it to people because of the stigmatization.
Yes.
I was afraid maybe people wouldn't believe me because my ex was someone who is well respected, and you're also afraid of what people may say. You protect the family.
Right.
And also, when you're having someone who is abusing you, they try to keep you away from your family and your friends, so you have no shoulder to lean on.
Right.
So you're thinking, okay, I'll go out there and talk to who? So you in your own cocoon, you know, you don't know what to do, who to talk to, and I guess it's fear. Fear is what kept me there. Yeah.
You know, Jennifer, I want to engage you on this one because you mentioned it didn't start like that. You know, it always starts very rosy and it's like a marriage made in heaven, as Ken Oko had once written about. But a lot of women do not know the signs that lead to domestic violence or the fact that they are in an abusive relationship.
An abusive relationship is one where the abuser seeks to gain and control power. It's always about power and control. And it could be physical or psychological.
Right.
Now, she said about being isolated.
Yes.
And those are some of the signs. If, for example, around the spouse or whoever is abusing, you need to walk on eggshells. You're scared. Fear is what kept her. You're scared all the time about doing something that will make them mad. Then it means that you're living with an abuser because you're afraid. You're not yourself. Isolation. You're not allowed to have friends, family.
Right.
You are on your own. Humiliation.
Right.
Everything that you do is never good enough. If it's someone who abuses you physically, they'll put the weapon there. It could be a gun. It could be a whip. It could be something. But just for you to see, it becomes you are afraid.
So to intimidate you,
It
basically.
intimidates you.
Yeah.
And it also goes to another level that when they are angry, they intimidate you by just breaking everything around the house. And some of them actually even take your own clothes and make a bonfire out of it, causing a lot of trouble. But one of the things about an abuser is that they could have a psychological problem. And people don't know. You just know that you're living with someone that is abusive. And what you don't recognize is that it goes beyond the normal. Some of them are socialized in that way. It starts in a subtle way, just putting you down because you're not good enough. And it progresses eventually to physical abuse and torture.
Right.
Yes.
Ken, I want to get you in on this one, just to kind of get into the psyche of an abuser. What is going through their head when they decide to, like you said, you isolate, you control, you intimidate? What is going through their minds?
You know, the weirdest thing is that those who are considered abusers are sometimes the most loving people on earth. And the idea is that he is so in love with you that he does not want to see anything bad about you. And there's also the jealous lover, the one who is so besotten to you that anytime he sees you talk to someone, even on phone, he's like, you know, clenching his fists and thinking, who the hell could that be? But the amazing thing is that it's easy to know. If you have these issues arising between the two of you without an observer, it's very easy to tell that this person could explode anytime, because those signs are always there.
Right.
And until you know for a fact that he is going to explode on you, you'll probably live hoping for the best, because marriages are built on that hope. There's nothing more that we invest in when we get married. When the two of you are together, the idea of making mistakes is part and parcel of starting a marriage. And if you make a mistake and he corrects you nicely and subtly, what we keep forgetting is that in the opposite sense, the women sometimes, they're not very good at expressing it to the man, but they'll probably tell their friends, this guy is like this, is like that. And eventually maybe it gets back to him. But if you also give that man a raw deal as a woman, then he's grumbling about what he sees, because he tells you, please don't do this, I don't like it, and you repeat it over and over again. You're actually culturing that man to become violent or to become an abuser,
Right.
even though it's not permitted in law
Exactly.
for you to do that. Yeah.
Exactly. Beverly, I'll come to you when it comes to issues of dealing with a high profile or a respected individual like you or Wanjiru, but I want to get your take, Wanjiru, on the emotional turmoil you were going through just before it became physical. What was that like, and what is he taking you through?
Well, some people say they prefer someone who beats them than someone who emotionally takes you through a roller coaster. And this is because mentally, you know, there's so many things going through your head.
Right.
You know, like he said, you try to please them, but nothing is ever good enough. And the moment your self-esteem goes down, then you don't even have the energy to do anything good. And you know, you keep thinking, is it me? Did I do something wrong? What can I do to make it better? And you know, you start comparing yourself with other people, for example. You know, you start comparing yourself to maybe your friends who are married and thinking maybe their wives are better than me. And so it's really bad. It's really bad because you get to a point where you feel like you're not worth living. So the moment you realize, I'm not good enough for this man who I cannot live without, then what is there to live for? And that is why you see people committing suicide. It's very easy to have those suicidal thoughts. Yeah.
You know, Beverly, as a lawyer, and I'm sure having dealt with something like this, how does someone get to the point where they can actually report it, especially when you're dealing with someone who is well known in society, is respected, and you want to try and deal with it quietly, but at least get some justice from what you've gone through?
One of the difficulties that survivors of victims of domestic violence have had in Kenya is because we've not had a cogent law that specifically addresses domestic violence. And that presents a number of problems. First and foremost, it's hard to deal with that which you do not know. And given we never had a law that defined what exactly domestic violence is, often survivors will only report when they're at the verge of death, you know, when the violence has really escalated. The second challenge that existed prior to the new laws is the process of just getting reprieve. The available law that existed then was the penal code. Now, this means that in the event of assault, that is a criminal case, and you go and report it to the police station. And most of survivors of domestic violence, when they report it to the police station, they'll often encounter police officers who will tell them, this is a private matter, go and deal with it, mambo ya nyumbani. Because it's a criminal matter, then the survivor is just reduced to giving evidence in court. Meaning, if you don't get a good prosecutor, then your case has a less likelihood of winning. And even then, once you win, the last quandary for most of survivors is the reprieve that is available to them, the relief. Often, if the case is so strong in terms of evidence, the perpetrator will be sentenced, either will be fined or be sentenced to imprisonment. And you find for most women, when they report these cases, they often just want the man to stop, you know, committing violence towards them. I must mention, recently Parliament enacted a law on domestic violence. It's called Protection Against Domestic Violence. One of the notable provisions in this particular law is, first and foremost, it defines what domestic violence is. And its definition includes psychological harm, it includes emotional abuse, and emotional abuse here could mean actually hindering your spouse from engaging in income-generating activity as a means to keep them and trap them.
So it broadens
within
the whole
abusive
thing of
relationship. Also, it includes verbal abuse, which is very common. It includes harassment, stalking a person, going to their place of work to
which is very
tell them
common.
no,
A lot of women go through that and don't know
that I'm here,
actually,
you're not going to go anywhere. The other tangible provision, notable provision in this particular legislation is that an applicant, a person who is a survivor of domestic violence, they need not only be the ones who are applying to court to obtain relief. It can be a friend. It can be a family member.
Yes, yes.
It can be a probation officer.
Right.
In case of children, it can be a children officer.
Let's take a short break, but we'll come back to talk about the whole issue of actually leaving. Yes, we have the legal and justice system, and we have an act in place now protecting victims, but some women don't have the strength to actually leave the situation. We'll talk more about that after this break. Welcome back. You're watching Victoria's Lounge. We're discussing domestic violence, something that is never easy. We have Wanjiru here, who is a survivor. Wanjiru, what kept you there? You know, a lot of people wonder, why do women still stay in a relationship where they are being beaten, they're emotionally being abused? What kept you? And you said this went on for a good 10 years before you actually decided to leave.
Well, it's never easy.
Yeah.
There's so many times that I've packed and left and found myself back. And yeah, people ask me, the moment I decided to open up, I've been asked why did you stay for so long if this was going on? Right. And it's not as easy as just packing up and leaving and forgetting about your marriage. When you have kids, it makes it even more difficult. And when you own things together, businesses together and stuff like that, because, you know, there's the issue of finances.
Exactly.
And there's also the issue of people may not believe you. And that is why they need evidence.
Yes.
You know, if they find you with a black eye, then they'll believe, oh, it actually happened.
Right. So the physical manifestation of abuse.
Yes, yeah. So, you know, you need to have some kind of evidence to explain to people, he did this to me. But without that, no one is going to believe you. So, and then there is no system. I don't know any safe house until recently where you could go and, you know, hide yourself for a few days. There is no set system where you can get help or seek help and know that your kids are also going to be safe. Right. So you just end up staying there. And I found that when there is an outburst and there is a fight, things cool down. You know, your partner now becomes so nice. There are gifts. You know, there is this honeymoon period.
So the makeup stage of it all.
Yes. Now it makes you forget. It makes you forget what happened yesterday.
Wanjiru mentioned something very interesting, that she left, came back, came back. And I heard a statistic one time that women leave around 8 times before they either leave dead or finally leave for good. And can, you know, for a man now, from your perspective, having to play those mind games with a woman, you know, to try and keep her and give her gifts and the makeup stage, you know, what is going through his mind in order to try and keep this woman who he slaps around, you know, almost every night?
You know, the masculine nature of a man is such that he needs to be in control. And part of that control is putting his woman on a leash. It depends on the type of leash that you're using, if it's an emotional one, physical one, whatever. But like I said earlier, I still maintain that a lot of people who are in these kind of relationships actually love each other. In sociological language, we look at 2 types of conflict. There's the instrumental type of conflict, which is actually good for marriage. It's a type of conflict where you fight and then you make up in a very beautiful manner, and thereafter you're tight for a while, and then something breaks again, and every time you fight, you get better as a couple. That fight actually strengthens you. The worst is the terminal type of conflict, where the fight actually makes it worse. Every time you fight, you get verbally abused, and that abuse never leaves you. And sometimes, I still say this, that women are very good at the non-violent, non-physical abuse, because they can tell you one word or one sentence that will never leave your mind for the rest of your relationship. In the overall, if you look at it, we have to be very careful with what Beverly was saying earlier about the law, because marriage is such a personal thing that by the time you bring it out to the table and say, okay, this is it, then like she was complaining earlier, you're probably ending the marriage. Because the minute you take me to court, yeah, then I'm looking at you and thinking, we're going to go back together and do this again?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so a lot of women and men would stay in it for as long as it takes. And that's why sometimes you have a whole 10 years of it. Because you're hoping for the best, you're hoping for tomorrow, and you know that the minute I take this action, it is terminal. That's the end of it.
Jennifer, you had mentioned this a bit earlier on during the break, that women even somewhat accept this as well, to stay in a relationship, to even keep a lifestyle that they feel, if I leave, I won't have this anymore.
I'm reminded of my own grandmother telling me about stories about when they were younger. If a husband did not beat you, you did something to provoke him to beat you.
Wow.
I was young, I didn't understand it. And I have now understood why. Because abuse is about a cycle of abuse. So whenever you're going through abuse, you actually don't think about the abuse, you think about the makeup. I know people that have been bought expensive gifts, including a new car, after you are abused.
Right.
And that just encourages the abuse to progress further and further.
A woman is told everything by her mother, her grandmother, especially like when she's about to have a child, all of you are there for her. But the man who trains him to be a father, who trains him to be a husband. So then they end up going into it with their own psyche, and they build their own cocoon and believe that my marriage is going to be like this. Yeah, and sometimes then you have a problem.
Wanjiro, I want to get it from you. You've been through it. And how did you muster up the courage? Because it takes a lot to actually walk out from something you knew for 10 years, a home you built for a very long time, and say, I've had enough. Where did you get that courage from?
It's something that I've been thinking about. I've done a lot of research, you know, reading books, just preparing myself. So the last straw for me was when I was beaten up and ended up in hospital. I faced death. That's what I keep saying. That was it.
Jennifer, I want to engage you on that one as well.
I'm just listening to her and thinking to myself, will it take you 10 years to actually continue gathering? The truth of the matter is, we take a level of self-blame. So what happens when you are in an abusive relationship, you are the blame, you are the one who is blamed for everything. So you're actually beaten or abused because you're foolish and you don't know what you're doing, you don't ever do it right. So you take it and you know that you are not good enough.
Right.
And that's when your self-worth is reduced to nothing. So you stay because you're hopeless, useless, and good for nothing. So when you're staying, you're trying to get better. You're trying to get better, but instead of getting better, you continue going down. Why? Because the abuser has one purpose: to put his thumb on you and not to allow you to find yourself. Now, when you continue being now the victim, you are also afraid of others. What will be said of me? And she keeps saying, they won't believe me. Who are they? They don't have to believe you. You are the one who knows what you're going through. Truth be told, the abuser is not necessarily a bad person. They are not actually doing you something wrong according to them. They are actually treating you. The Bible says, bring up your child in the ways of the Lord, and don't spare the rod and spoil the child. So that is applicable to the woman who's a child in the house. You spare the rod, you spoil the child. So for the woman, I mean, you got to whip her a little bit so that she is not going to be spoiled. Now, unless you are aware, it is about awareness. Awareness is the heartbeat of therapy. The minute you are aware that this discipline is a bit excessive and I cannot take it, it's when you begin your healing. Everybody else, by the way, can see that you are in an abusive relationship, but you love this person so much. So how can I leave them? I cannot live without them. And that's what keeps you staying. And I believe personally that as much as the courts are there to support us, we need to have the level of the family social fabric where they are there to support you before we go to the courts.
Yeah, yeah.
The elders,
Yeah, yeah.
the people that supported us when we were getting married.
Exactly.
We need to go through that kind of
So that support system.
that support
yeah.
system.
Where
That's
is it?
what we are lacking.
Right, right.
It's not about laws. We are
Right.
lacking support systems that guide us and hold us accountable even in this.
And in the area of where those do fail, and they do not show up, friends and family, they feel that's your issue. We'll let you deal with it.
Yes.
And Beverly, I want to engage you on this
Yes.
one. On the legal end of it, we still are lacking things like safe houses where women feel, if I have a place to go, where is it? Where I will be protected, where my children will be protected as well. And ensuring that they even get legal services as well. Who do they talk to? How are they counseled through this process of trying to detach from this contract, really, which is a marriage, and start their lives afresh?
Our constitution recognizes family as a basic unit. So to that extent, that the family is recognized and the institution of marriage is recognized by our constitution,
Right.
then it shows there is a nexus between what happens in our day-to-day life and that actually the state is interested in ensuring that our homes are safe havens. And now in relation to culture, from the video that you've showed to us, I think at times we really underestimate how culture has a way of seeping in terms of enforcement of the law. So if you are dealing with a police officer who is within a culture where violence is the norm,
Yes, yeah.
you find it will be hard to get assistance from that kind of a police officer.
Right.
The
Or
same
even
when
the
you go
area
to
chief where people go to
court, for
report.
instance,
Yeah.
and you encounter a judicial officer who grew up in an environment where violence is part and parcel of
Right.
life, then it will be hard to get proper relief
Yeah.
from that court. And the law is very clear in setting out what kind of culture are permissible. And when you're talking about domestic violence, I want us to look at what are the effects of domestic violence to the survivors. Invariably, it leads to violation of some of their rights. For instance, their right to liberty. It
Right.
affects their right to health. Also, it affects their right to life, where violence ends up being fatal.
Right.
So to that extent, we cannot argue that because domestic violence is part and parcel of our culture, then our laws should accommodate it. It
Right.
cannot work. There's some family
Yeah.
that is part of their culture.
Exactly.
So it's hard to go and tell them you're beaten. They'll tell you that's part and parcel of marriage,
yes,
right?
yes.
So that's where I believe law becomes important. If the social support is not strong,
broken down,
at
yes.
least you have protection of the law.
Right.
And I want to emphasize that currently under the new act, which was passed this month by the president, is that the fact that a person wants to get reprieve from domestic violence does not mean that it will lead to breakup of that marriage institution, which was previously in the past, whereby if you report this person who's abused you, they're likely to end in jail.
Yes.
Then you end up worrying, what will happen to my children?
And
If the person
sustaining
was
your
a
life,
provider,
yeah.
what will happen to me? The current legislation provides, depending on the circumstances, courts can actually order for persons who are being abused to go to a safe house. So it means that government has to put in place safe houses. Or courts can actually order that the person should restrain from being within you, within certain vicinity. They should not come to your place of work. Or even they can actually order that the person should not, move out of the house if need be. The other reason why you find most of survivors don't want to move out, as Wanjiru has said, you've built up this property together. So if you move out, what do you remain with? Under the current legislation that was passed recently, the court will take that into consideration and may order how you are able to live within that property without necessarily losing your interest. And if need be, if you need to move out, then the person who has been abusing the victim, or rather the survivor, can be ordered to compensate the cost of you moving out of that house, buying new household. So that's why I see once we implement this particular law, it's going to address most of the challenges we faced that has perpetuated the culture of domestic violence.
So certainly you've made a lot of progress when it comes to the legal aspect of it.
Victoria,
Wanjiru,
I
yes.
have a problem with the law and marriage. I didn't say it doesn't apply, but...
and you've written a whole book about this
yes,
as well.
And when we teach about marriage in sociology, we list 5 different ways of legitimizing marriage.
Yes.
The last of those is actually the legal one, because it's just a piece of paper. Now it protects you against property, against all this hullabaloo.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, marriage literally survives on the triple S factor, the social support systems. And you know, anytime, once you get married, that's why we have a wedding and everybody comes to witness. You belong to the community. Your mother, your father, your auntie, everybody around you will have a say in that marriage. And you have very little, by the way, to do other than go to them and say, oh, he's treating me pretty well, because they keep checking on you.
Yeah.
That's why we have visitations. It's very important. That is social legitimacy. People come to visit you out of the blues and they stay for a whole week and you're thinking, what are they doing here?
Yeah.
But they're actually just monitoring how the two of you live. Then they go back to the village and say, those guys are okay, leave them alone,
Right,
even if
right.
you're fighting.
Let's take a short break here on Victoria's Lounge. We'll be back with much more. Welcome back. You're watching Victoria's Lounge. We're discussing domestic violence. I want to get to Wanjiru's last comments in terms of the healing process and what you've gone through. I know it's not gone, it's not past. And we just need to get to you. If a woman is watching right now and she's saying, I'm here, or I've just left, how do you get past that? How do you deal with the emotional and sometimes even the physical scars from the past relationship?
Well, I think it's all up here. The moment you tell yourself, I can do this, then you can do that. So for me, it wasn't, like I said earlier, I was detaching myself slowly.
Yes.
Yeah, so it didn't happen overnight. And it's possible. Now with the new laws, you're protected unlike before.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And I think the first thing you need to do is have a support system. You know, friends, talk about it. Before I came to the show, my sister called me and asked me, are you really sure you want the whole world to know your issues?
Yeah.
So if you see me sitting here and talking about it, it's because I'm not afraid anymore of what people will say, of what my friends will say. You know, I'm ready to start from a scratch because there's that lifestyle I was used to. And now things have to change.
Right.
And the kids will have to have, you know, 2 homes where they will go to. And it's possible. You just have to believe in yourself and know that you're worth it. My biggest problem was self-esteem. I had very low self-esteem. It reached a point where I actually believed that I deserved what was being done to me. And, you know, it's all about awareness as well. Talking to people, getting to know that it's not okay to be treated the way you're being treated. And that has really helped me a lot. And also putting your finances in order. I know it's not easy, but it's always good as a woman, you know, to know that you have something to fall back to. So it's possible. It's possible for you to just say enough is enough. I am worth being loved. I am worth being treated well. You know, I deserve to be happy. And that's all. It's all upstairs.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. I want to say thank you to my guests as we wrap up: Ken Oko, Beverly Ongaro, Wanjiru Moiriru, and Jennifer Karuna. Thank you so much. Well, it's clear from our conversation today that domestic violence is not an easy issue to talk about, an easy issue to deal with. I want to tell you a story about a woman that I once knew. She was a mother of 3 and a wife. She would go over and above to ensure that they have everything that they needed. She loved her husband. She loved her kids. And in this seemingly perfect scenario was a woman who was hiding behind the living room couch, blocking her face from the blows of her husband. She was being abused for many, many years and had been told countless times by friends and family to leave. But the thought of leaving the family and the home that she built for many years was what kept her for that long time to endure that kind of abuse. But one day, The man that she knew and loved from her teenage years put a bullet in the back of her head when she was trying to leave through the back door of their house after a heated argument. Now she's left her children motherless and fatherless now that her husband was arrested and jailed. And the problem with this woman was that she was not poor. She was not uneducated. She was not unaware of her rights, of what she could do to get out of the situation. But she did not heed the warnings. And to a woman who's watching today who could be in that same situation, for you to actually walk out of that door alive, you can get help. And I want to give you some context on your screen right now from the Coalition on Violence Against Women. They have a hotline, they have emails, and an area where you can reach them to get some help. You have a choice to walk out, to have a life after what you went through. So walk away. Say no more. Say enough is enough. So far too many women are out with friends for dinner or walking to your car, and you don't know what to do in a situation where a perpetrator could come and try and attack you. So I'm actually here at Premier Gym to meet with Carol, who will take us through a few tips on self-defense.
So if someone attack me from up, so when you attack me like this. So you step forward, block and keep distance, then you defend, you disarm and you attack. Or again, you defend, you disarm and you attack. Yeah. Then also, now attack from the side, there, there. Ah! And that is 1, this is 2, that is 3, that is 4. Yeah. If it is from behind, there is a weak point here and here. So you go 1, 2. If not so, there. If not so, there. But you should always unlock. Cut the air supply.
Whoa.
Yes. Yes. Cut the air.
So you get the eyes.
The eyes.
Air supply.
That one.
This.
Then cut the air supply.
So you hit them here.
Yes, yes, and they get disorganized for like 10 seconds. Then it gives you time to take off. Even a hair clip, instead of using this, a hair band, use a metal hair clip where you know that you'll be in danger. Use a metal hair clip, a small screwdriver. If you're going to a danger zone, you can use a ring, you can use a bangle, but not all the time. Again, we do not want to have a society that is warlike, you know. Yes. Be at peace, but again, be wise. Yes. Be aware.
It has been such a pleasure having you join me on Victoria's Lounge. Let's do this again next week. Different topic, same place though. We want to hear from you. If there's anything you want to talk about, a topic, an experience that you've gone through, and you actually want to come on the show, engage us on social media, we want to hear from you. Enjoy the rest of your viewing and have a wonderful night.